Good evening, Energy Rogue Nation. Welcome back to another weather discussion. Thank you all so much for tuning in. In tonight's video, as advertised, we're going to be talking about the winter outlook, the rest of winter for Western and Eastern Europe. And it's going to be a relatively fast forecast. For my European friends who are watching this video and are not subscribed to Energy Rogue, I will tell you right now that if there are any questions that come up, of course you can post those down in the comments below. But we also have a lot more details on weather discussion, weather talk about the United States for the rest of January into February. We talk about Europe too. Head on over to energyrogue.com. Get yourself signed up with a subscription. It is, in many cases, I think it's $89 a month for the basic tier, and anything higher is a little bit more, but it gives you access to content like this, more personable content too. So if you are interested, energyrogue.com, you can head on over there and check it out. But for tonight's discussion, because we are recording this a little bit earlier on in the day, I am going to be kind of speed running this discussion tonight and keeping it rather brief in comparison to the one we had on Tuesday, where we talked about the winter outlook for the United States. Of course, as I said, if you have any questions that do come up and you want a little bit more of some elaboration on anything we talk about tonight, you can post that down in the comments below. And for my friends here from Energy Rogue, who are currently subscribers, feel free to ask those questions in the Discord and I can give you some more detailed responses to what you're looking for. But want to start first with this in the immediate short term. We'll then head over to our climate models to show you more of a long-term perspective. You'll find it to be rather interesting. More on that a little bit later on. But as we always do here on the channel, if you're not used to it already, we always start with the 500 millibar jet, and that is our jet stream. And we are, in this case, looking at the GFS interpretation of what will be the next couple of weeks. And there's an interesting feature that shows up on the models, not just the GFS, but also the European model. Take a look at the Central Atlantic. So recall that anytime you have this peak, you're really talking about an upper level ridge, right? So an area of high pressure that tends to, we'll say, keep temperatures at the surface more mild and stable, respectively. Anytime you see these blues or these troughs, that is corresponding to areas of low pressure. If we know anything about low pressure, they tend to come from the poles. They come from, in the United States case, the Rockies. They can sometimes come from, even portions of the Gulf or even the southwestern United States. There's different source regions, but ultimately that tends to bring colder air with it. Low pressure is more synonymous with cold air. High pressure is more synonymous with warmer air. And so this feature, I want you to pay very close attention to this upper level ridge, which really, this is as of earlier on in the week, and watch what happens to it over time. So we'll fast forward to now. By the time we get to Wednesday, Thursday, look at that difference, right? Look at that. So you go from an upper level ridge, pretty ample, large peak across the northern Atlantic and the central Atlantic, and then watch how that flattens out forecasted by this weekend. That essentially goes from an ample ridge more to a smushed zonal high pressure across the southern and central Atlantic. This is significant on two different faucets. If we're talking about the United States, you could make the argument that as that high pressure matures and develops, that is going to bring easterly flow up into the Gulf and thus keep the southern United States mostly mild over these next couple of weeks, right? Barring any sort of cold that mixes in, otherwise rather mild. But then connecting this back to Europe, how this applies to you is that because of that zonal high pressure, that allows the polar jet to streak right across Western Europe. That's significant. We'd be talking about some polar air getting back into Western Europe, which, if I'm not mistaken, has really been kind of a mixed bag. It hasn't been as consistent, but I will say my original forecast of a mild Western Europe may not be verifying right now. And it looks to be the case here even in the next couple of weeks. So that high pressure, that evolution between a ridge and then becoming compressed right near the central Atlantic, being more of this zonal high pressure, that has huge implications on the Europe side of things. I know we've been so focused on the United States the last few weeks, But this is something that we really have to keep our eye on here. And this feature is actually going to set up here in the immediate short term as soon as tomorrow. As a matter of fact, if we were to look at observations, which we're not going to, you would see that this feature is pretty much already in place. And according to this one solution, as well as others that we've looked at, it does continue to show this zonal high pressure, albeit meandering across the central Atlantic by the time we get to next week, still in place. And as a result of that, that keeps your polar air streamlining into Western Europe. And we'll see what that means for Eastern Europe. By the looks of it, if we're going to be seeing cold air meandering across Western Europe, that tells me, and we can verify this in a second, that we have high pressure downstream of that, probably keeping Eastern Europe on the opposite spectrum, more of these above normal temperatures. So we'll continue this throughout into early next week, but let's see what happens as we get towards what would be the middle of next week and even into the latter half. You do see that ridge sort of reemerging yet again, and that could provide some relief, possibly, for Western Europe. But once again, look what happens. We got cold air right behind it yet again, meandering into Western Europe. So similar to that of the United States, it really looks like a mixed bag also for Europe. Models are picking up on a transition to zonal for a moment in time, but then once we get through that first week of February, it kind of goes away. But I'm expecting that to come back, and even the models also show that too by the time we get to the latter half of that first week of February. So at least in the immediate short term, we are likely to be looking at some well below normal temperatures, especially for Western Europe. And let's go ahead and take a look at that more up close and in person. And rather than looking at the jet stream, we'll show off the temperature anomalies themselves. We started much of this week above normal for a large swath of Europe, and pretty much in line with my prediction, although way more short term than my prediction was forecasting. And if we take this then to Friday, watch what happens, right? We see really high temperature anomalies across Europe. That's likely to do with a warm front that passes through places like France, Germany, and even up towards the Nordic countries. Also seeing some above normal temperatures. But then as we head towards that early next week period, there comes those below normal temperatures beginning to seep in, and those stick around for quite a while, beginning early next week and likely lasting over the next week and a half, possibly even 2 weeks for Western Europe. But as we expected, look at the tale of two winters. It also applies to Europe. This is not some swan song. This is, it seems like both continents have been pretty much in lockstep with each other month to month, and it seems as though we're going to start out February also being in lockstep with one another, where we see a mixed bag, it being Western Europe below normal, but then Eastern Europe being under that above normal temperature regime downstream of that polar jet that plunges through the area and keeps Western Europe cold, but likely some sort of high pressure hanging around the Black Sea and the Mediterranean that will keep those temperatures still above normal for Eastern Europe. I have to say, overall for Eastern Europe, forecast is verified in that respect. We are seeing a pretty mild winter for the most part across that area of the continent, where Eastern Europe is experiencing some even well above normal temperatures, for a large part of the season. And so if we now look a little bit long term, right, that's the next week and a half, 2 weeks, we can have that expectation of some of those temperatures. I'll even just go ahead and show off the euro. I want to see if it's also in lockstep. I believe it was. I would not be shocked if it was. And it is, although it's a lot more timid with the cold, but it still is showing it nonetheless. So a pretty strong signal on our singular solutions, our medium range guidance. Ensembles are also showing a pretty similar picture. But now let's take a look at the more forward-thinking approach here by looking at our climate models. And this is where, as I was looking through this product, and remember our climate models go out month to month, I was thinking to myself, is this really painting an accurate picture? I would make the argument yes. And what I mean is, if we take a look at the month of February, right, these are our temperature anomalies, but looking more month to month, we see that Western Europe is slightly above normal, but look at much of Eastern Europe, especially out towards Ukraine and Belarus, and even towards Poland. You're seeing more of those well above normal temperatures. That's pretty much in line with what we've seen thus far. But what is a little bit different is that our climate models are showing, despite these above normal temperatures, the lighter of the above normal being for Western Europe, which tells me that there's going to be some mixed bag signals according to our climate models for the month of February. That does not shock me. That's also something similar to what we're seeing in the United States output for the CFS. So I would really, if there's one thing I would take away from this and really drive home to all of you, especially from my friends in Europe who are heavily invested in this area, expect, I'll say likely, a mixed bag winter for the month of February, right? So if we're just isolating it to February, I'm expecting a mixed bag where we see some bouts of cold air dig across Western Europe as it relates to that high pressure in the Atlantic, similar to that of the Pacific high, sort of expanding and contracting, right? It's not consistent. It's very much an accordion right now. That continuing throughout the month of February. I do see, though, as we end out February and into early March, that polar jet that we were just talking about to kick off the conversation, that beginning to kind of wane a bit, especially as we exit out of La Nina slowly and eventually move to more of a neutral pattern. So if we were to even go a step further, for example, and look at the month of March, you would see that we really begin to see those temperatures increase, those anomalies. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the models are picking up on a La Nina that right now is very, very fragile. It's very weak. And I think, in my opinion, from a climatological point of view, I think we've seen probably the worst of winter already. I think that's already done. We will still see winter. It's not going away, but I think the worst of it for both Europe and the United States is likely behind us once we exit January. So keep that in mind, but once again, main point to take away from this video tonight is I'm expecting, similar to the United States with Europe, a mixed bag. Western Europe will likely see some volatility with the temperatures. Eastern Europe, I would be floored if they were below normal for even a week. I think it's going to be pretty consistent above normal with the current pattern that we're in for the most part across that area, an area of which that has been pretty mild for much this season. Listen, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, like I said, post those down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Share this video as well with your network. And of course, be sure to check out EnergyRogue.com for the latest weather information. You can get it through our Discord, and also trading information too. Brian and Bill are wonderful resources over there. Trust me, you will find it's worth every penny. Be sure to check it out for more information, EnergyRogue.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next weather video. Take care.